welcome to this arts and crafts kind of flute cast. It's a little bit different because we're doing how to put on a flute binding. You can see a binding on this flute. It was a very important binding because it happened during a recording session. Actually, I was waiting to get into the recording studio, and I'm outside, I'm playing my song away, I'm practicing it, and I look down and there's actually a crack that goes right up into the sound mechanism, which is very bad on these flutes. And I was horrified, but the recording engineer, Butch Hall, this was his studio, and he gave me this material for the wrap. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I knew how to put on wraps, and I went outside and I put on the wrap, and I put it on really tight, and it closed up the split that happened, and it's never been repaired since. This is the original binding, and there's no sign of the crack. The crack is completely closed up, and the flute has played great for, the last 10 years. We're going to show you how to put on these wraps. It's a really kind of an important thing to know as a flute player, because it happens in all kinds of emergency situations. This flute actually cracked in the middle of a meditation session. The bamboo, right? Bamboo is quite prone to cracking, much more than wooden flutes. And I'm playing away. I'm playing this beautiful flute away in a zazen sitting meditation. Everything's very quiet. I'm playing away. I'm doing my mellow thing, and crack! Really loud. If I hadn't been, sitting quietly playing it, I would have jumped out of my seat, but it actually cracked in the back. And I've bound it a number of times. It takes a few minutes to put on each of these wraps. I've bound it in several positions. And one thing to keep in mind is, the aesthetic quality, where you put the wraps, the color of the wrap, and balance it with the flute, and especially avoid the finger holes, of course. Be very aware of where you're putting your fingers, that the wraps aren't interfering with your playing. So you got quite a wide view of the studio because I'm going to be standing up a little bit later. You need to see my feet and my hands as I do this. But you also get to see some of the additions we've put in into the studio since the Great Flood. One thing we've got are these panels on the walls, and they've cut down a problem which we had in this studio, which was if you clap your hands, and if you hear kind of a slap back echo, that isn't pleasant, that's what I was hearing here. And it was because these two walls are parallel to each other. So we just put these sound absorbing panels on. You can purchase them now. A lot of suppliers produce them inexpensively. And they're these 2-inch thick panels that absorb a lot of sound. And they've really improved the situation here. So that's the studio. This is actually since the Great Flood of 2016. A lot of people heard about the water pipe in the ceiling that broke above here and flooded this floor. So it was a real disaster for a while. Okay, back to the arts and crafts session. Some flutes come with bindings. The makers put bindings on them. This flute actually did come with bindings. That was a wood flute, but this is another bamboo flute. And again, they're prone to cracking, so a lot of bamboo flute makers put bindings on them. There were bindings in these locations, but it, even with the bindings, developed a crack right up in this area, so I added a few more bindings. So feel free to put bindings on and take them off. They can be removed, and for the most part, they won't cause any permanent damage to the flute. This is a flute that we're going to bind today. It's actually the top half of a very long Chinese flute. It's got the classic poem in an old dialect of Chinese written on it, and the sound hole is here. You blow across it, and it's developed these cracks. Hope you can see them there. That we're going to fill in. Now, the first thing you might think of when you see a crack is, I want to fill it. I want to put something in it to close the crack. What I've been told by some flute makers is, if you do that with a material, especially one that hardens, like a hard glue, is that these cracks expand and contract over time depending on moisture. So if you put something in there that prevents it from contracting when it gets less moist, the crack will then extend further down. It will act as a lever in that spot as it's closing, and it will cause the crack to migrate further down. Some people I've heard recommend beeswax in there, which remains soft and can close it and make it an airtight seal. But I think for me, the best thing is bind it, and you will keep it closed forever, and probably you will close the crack. How do you tell if there's a crack? Do you go around looking for cracks? The typical thing that's going to happen on a flute, I'll play this flute, you're going to be playing your flute, and it's going to sound like you've got a leak under your fingers. You're going to be playing along. You'll start hearing squeaking like that. It's as if what I'm actually doing to make this happen is I'm leaking my finger to make it sound like, to emulate a crack. If you have a tiny, even a tiny crack in the side of the flute, it's not going to play, especially the lower notes, cleanly. It's going to start squeaking. It's going to start jumping up into the high register. If that starts to happen, and you're pretty sure you've got your finger holes closed, look very carefully at the surface of the flute and see where the crack is, because you'll likely find a crack. Okay, so I'll show you the things that you need, but let me tell you, there's a page out on Flutopedia that lists this in detail. It shows pictures, and it also lists particular suppliers for some of the things I'm going to show you. So go out to Flutopedia and look at the how to bind a flute page, and this video kind of augments that and shows how to do it. The first and most important thing you're going to need is eye protection. Now, I'm actually wearing sufficient eye protection with my glasses, but I'm going to reinforce that with what you would wear for eye protection if you didn't have glasses on. I'm going to put these on at the risk of looking funky on YouTube. And I'm going to wear these very stylish goggles and proceed with other things you're going to need. Needle nose pliers, very, very helpful. We're going to use those. Cuticle scissors. We're going to be doing some fine clipping work. You're going to need a tape. I use this blue tape, a tape that will not damage the body of the flute, because we're going to tape this right onto the flute to hold down our string, various kinds of string. The important thing about the string is that it is strong and slightly stretchy, because you're going to want to pull against it and have it, for the lifetime of the wrap, continue to pull back and keep on closing that crack. Where do you get them? Suppliers are listed on Flutopedia. This is a black Niletex, which is for shoe repair. This is actually a string, fantastic string that I found. Unfortunately, I can't tell you the supplier because I found it in a small shop in a rural town in China. And I went in, and, people coming in and they're buying, 12 feet of string that they need. And I simply went in and bought the whole roll, and they were so impressed. And then I told them what it was for. We actually found a translator who spoke English, and we told them it was for flutes. And it's going to appear on a video on YouTube. And they were so impressed, and we took pictures. And yeah, but I can't tell you where I got it. So I use that for a lot of my wraps. Keep an eye out for good wrap material. Keep an eye out for colored wrap material. I think Stellar Flutes actually uses a colored string on their wraps and creates kind of a pattern with that string. It's kind of interesting. We're just going to use this regular unwaxed nylon string. You have a choice, big choice, of whether you use waxed or unwaxed. If you use unwaxed string, it's a little bit more difficult to work with, but it does allow you to glue the wrap afterwards and give it added strength and added support. If it's waxed, you're not going to be able to glue it. Glue will not stick to it. And you're just going to have to rely on the tie itself to hold it in place forever. Okay, we have one more thing we're going to need is some kind of a rod that it has to be very strong. This is 1-inch PVC, and it'll be as long as you want, but you're going to stand on this. I'm going to take off enough string to do the job. Okay, let's get a little bit more there. Good, and now I'm going to wrap it from the bottom. I'm just going to take enough wraps on this in order to hold it in position so that it does not come undone. Okay, that's good. Up at the top here, I'm going to make a loop about that long, maybe 2 inches, and I'm going to lay the loop. First of all, I'm going to decide where I want the bump. There is a bump inherent in, you see that bump? That's a part of the wrap that sits underneath the circular wrap, and we want that on the back side. We want that on the unseen side of the flute. So we're going to decide which is the back. I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to lay my loop on the back side of the flute. I'm going to take a piece of tape. I'm going to take a piece of tape, and I'm going to tape that. I'm going to tape the loop part. That's temporary. That'll come off later. And now I begin my wraps. My first wrap is fairly loose, and I keep this loop straight, and I run my wrap across over the free end part, and I raise the flute up till I get some tension, and I very lightly apply tension as I'm wrapping. The first wrap, you're just holding it freehand, and I'm turning the entire flute down against the wrap, and as I'm doing this, I begin applying more and more pressure. Stand on the bar on the floor, hold your balance, and now I begin sighting directly down the string. And this is why you have the eye protection, because as you pull, you're going to pull up more and more, and if the string breaks, it will hit you in the eye. So that is something we definitely have to protect. Now I've got 2 wraps here. Counting is important. If you put on multiple wraps, you're going to want to count the number of wraps so that you have the same number of wraps on each flute, on each of the wraps down the flute. I've got 3 wraps so far, and as I'm getting into 3 wrap territory, I can start really pulling up. Depends on how much resistance I have on the body of the flute. I'm actually starting to pull up really fairly strongly here. At some point, I'm going to get to the point where I can pull up and I don't have to hold on, and I can really do this with 2 hands. I typically take 12 wraps. But for this guy, maybe I'll go 14. I'm pulling up, and I'm really applying some tension here. Okay, and at some point, now the fun part. Take your cuticle scissors. Hopefully they're within reach. Actually, I'm going to release the tape first, because we're going to need that very quickly. Now I've got a loop here. The loop is my target. I'm going to release the tension, but I'm going to hold my finger on the wrap. Okay. Still holding my finger on the wrap. I'm going to take the free end and put it through the loop. Okay, now I've got it through the loop. And the original free end, I'm going to grab with the needle nose pliers and pull it through. If you have trouble pulling it through, you take a little turn and pull it through very carefully. There we go. Make sure you've got tension on both free ends. And I'm going to take this free end. I'm going to take, I actually took a wrap with the needle nose pliers, and I'm going to pull it through, and I'm actually going to pull it underneath the wrap. This is the more challenging this is, the harder, the better the wrap is. There we go. And I'm going to pull it about halfway underneath the wrap. And now I don't need tension anymore because my wrap is in place. can neaten up my wrap a little bit, make sure everything looks good. It's on the back side of the flute. I've got two loose ends here. It is now holding itself in place. And now, very carefully, so as not to damage the body of the flute, I'm going to get as close as I can to the back of the wrap. Let me get my chair back in place here. I'm going to get as close as I can to the back of the wrap. And very carefully with the cuticle scissors, snip it off. Hope we can see that. Okay. You don't have to get all that close the first time. You can clean it up a little bit later. Do it again over here. And now, that's not totally neat. We can do a better job with those ends later. And now we have a wrap on the flute. And this crack has substantially closed up. Now, this was an absolutely massive crack. You would probably need another one and another two, maybe a total of 3 wraps in this area to close this crack. So that is putting on flute wraps. Actually, this is a venture we used to do at flute workshops. We did this. We took all the gear to these flute workshops, and we had everybody doing this, and we had goggles for everybody, and it was a big project, and it was a big arts and crafts project for something that is actually probably going to happen in your career 2 or 3 times. So instead of doing this at workshops, which is a lot of work and a lot of effort, we hope that this video will cover it so that when you come to one of our workshops, please come to one of our workshops. You'll have a great time. We can sit down and make music with our flutes that have been wrapped for the video. So come to the workshop and show us your beautiful wraps. We'll take pictures of those and we'll put them on the web, and then we can all make music together. Bye for now. Hope you can join us in the workshop.